Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We're getting ever so close to the start of football. There are college football games scheduled for this week. I don't know if they're going to happen. Which ones were they? They were like some of the smaller conference ones. I can't remember the names off the top of my head. Let me see if I can find them. But a lot of the conferences, they're playing a wait-and-see game. But before we even get into the college stuff, actually, let me just see if I have the names here. Maybe I don't. Some conferences, they proposed that they're going to cancel other sports except for football, which is crazy. But I wanted to talk about fantasy football first, before anything else. So we have NFL. It right now doesn't have any answers. Everyone that listens to the show in the past knows that I'm the commissioner of our fantasy football league. I've been waiting, trying to get clear answers on how I'm supposed to set it up, what's going to happen, like what's the player contingencies here. And right off the bat, Yahoo goes ahead and they announce that you can just pause your league. So you can pause it and you can come back whenever and it will still be there, like a year or two, because we have a keeper league. And so that's one of the big keys is what happens if we start the year and not everyone plays, but then you only get 3 games in and they cancel, or 4 games in, 5 games, because you don't know. There's a big thing in the NFL where you have a lot of coaches that are, I don't want to say old, but are in the high risk group. And the NFL, they put out a statement where they were saying like, hey, some of these coaches, they're not afraid to be out there. And I know they're probably opting in. It's like going to any other job. I mean, they're getting paid a lot more than the normal guy that has to go to work. And so I don't feel bad for them, if I'm being honest. But in terms of trying to plan fantasy football, it's going to be, in my mind, an absolute nightmare. I mean, what are your thoughts on it, Matt, going in, just from an overall perspective?
An overall perspective, it's going to be a crazy season, and I think it's just a matter of, I say just give it a go. Get started with it, because I'm definitely, in our league, I'm in.
Well, I'll tell you right off the bat.
I'm making a formal declaration on the show, I'm in. And there's no asterisk when I win.
Well, of course I was in. I was hoping for the least amount of people, because if I did win, there would be no asterisk, right? And I would brag about it just like my other championships, wear the Top Gun hat and everything. But in terms of just league structure, what do you think of potential changes for this year off the top of your head? Because we were doing 2 waiver weeks or 2 waiver days. It was like Wednesday or Thursday and then Saturday, so that you had your picks in because it's auction. We're going to have to at least do 3 or 4, because if someone gets, they didn't even put out a schedule of when they're going to test. And I'm assuming they're still doing the Thursday night games because it looks like that's the start of the season. If someone tests positive on Sunday, do they make it back in terms for the Thursday night game if they have that coming up? Like, there's a lot of unknowns. I don't know what the protocol is going to be. So in terms of like waiver wires, any other like roster settings, what are your thoughts?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of like the element of having the days that we have, being able to get stuff set up ahead of time. But I can, because I think for the most part, the guys that are opting in are staying in, and with the day, like right now, they're testing daily, I believe. So I think if you're not exposing yourself to people who might be infected, then I don't think that there's a high possibility that these players are going to end up contracting it. So I think once we actually get into it, I think the biggest hurdle in all of this is it's getting us off the ground. And whether it's high school, college, or pros, I think it's just giving it that opportunity to see how the changes are going to be to people being out.
And that's going to be the big thing, because it's not even just people that are sitting out, you also have, in terms of like unknowns, the injuries that are 100% going to happen. So you could get into a situation where, I know it's college level, but Oklahoma has come out and said where they've had an entire position group except for one guy test positive, so they're out. They didn't say what position group it is, but like if that's your offensive line, because those guys are all together all the time, what do you do? Because what people aren't thinking of at practice in film rooms, you're grouped by your position group. So if someone in that position group gets it, especially along the offensive defensive lines, and they're practicing where you're pushing each other every day or whatever, that whole group's going to get it. So then, like, are you just playing an entire week with a backup? Like, what if that's your defense? Like, that's something you need to know. So I'm hoping that they're giving us heads up. I know if they're testing every day, when are they making the announcements of positives? Because that's my big thing. That first game usually kicks off at 1, which is also another tricky thing because are they having early games this year or did they cancel those already?
Well, I think to help you out with it, if you do like the waiver wires, if you're allowing them to do it every day, everyone has the same opportunities. If that's a setting that you can change and just have it just be a daily thing and it cuts off at noon.
I would say, yeah, I guess we could do every day. I don't know. We'll have to put it up to a vote. But in terms of like other leagues, I know they probably do that every day.
Because
but
if you do
auction,
it every day,
it's a lot different.
Part of it is you'll get the obsessive compulsive people who will just make roster changes every day, drop this guy, add this guy, drop, add, and just go back and forth, like constantly making changes to their roster. And it'll also cut out part of the excuse of people that, like, yeah, I think with some guys in our league, it was just like they would just not update their roster. So they'd end up having players on their bench that could have started and just didn't put them in.
Or, because I think over time we've lost a lot of those people, or what happens is you have guys that still don't know that you can put multiple bids in for the waiver wire. And so they're like, shucks, I'll bid again because I'm not going to have a running back this week. So you're right. You're going to have the obsessive guys. And I'm just talking in terms of general. Like if you're playing fantasy football this year, you're going to have to start learning backup dudes. I mean, the NFL right now, they're expanding the roster. The one thing that I thought was interesting that came up, and I sent it to you as a note, the PIAA made their decision. That was last Friday, right? We didn't talk about that on this show. They met and they came out, and I was listening to, I don't even know if it was the official press conference, whatever I could find on the radio, but they were saying that they're leaving it up to the high schools. So they're recommending that the high school makes their own call because they know like their community better, which is a smart move because then they're not going to be the ones to blame if so-and-so loses a scholarship or on the other hand, if so-and-so gets sick and dies. Like they're just washing their hand of it. But the one thing that was interesting that they brought up, they said that different cities, and I think they picked out Pittsburgh, have different social distancing laws or whatever in place. I don't know if it's actually legal that they could enforce it, but they said that they can only cluster 50 people. And so if the Steelers were having a game, they didn't specifically say the Steelers, but they said if there was a high school team, the max they could have on a sideline, which would be considered one cluster, is 50 people. So the NFL usually dresses what? More than that. Plus 55, is it 55, 56? What's their roster size? And then you have coaches, trainers, and everybody else. So my first thought was, holy crap, I never even thought of that in terms of Pitt Panthers. They're supposed to play. Their sideline is even bigger because they have all the walk-ons. So pretty much all those guys, you're probably not going to be able to be there. And in terms of the Steelers, are they just going to split in half? Like you have offensive guys down here, defensive guys, or something else? Because I can't believe that Pittsburgh would be the only city and Pennsylvania the only state where they have group cluster sizes or whatever they were calling them in place. And so that's going to be another big thing for the NFL. I know they were trying to increase roster sizes. I'm guessing if a guy's quarantining, they're not going to have him there. And hopefully we would know ahead of time. I'm also worried about an Andrew Luck type scenario where, let's say one of these guys gets sick. We've already seen it with a Major League Baseball pitcher where they got sick with it, thought they got better. They started to have heart issues. They're shut down for the rest of the year. So if you get, and it's not even just in terms of fantasy football, it's in terms of like a guy's career. What if it's a guy that is barely on the roster that happens to him? They're pretty much done. So I'd hope that they'd have contingencies in place, or at least some type of NFL PA deal, blah, where they can take care of some of these guys. But could you imagine if like Tom Brady has the Buccaneers out to like a 10-0 start, and then it comes back that he has like complications? Because he's been one of the guys that's been just like out at the park and doing whatever. So well, he's not following the precautions. I think they were already yelling at him.
Yeah, and he's old. He's in the target bracket for contracting coronavirus. It affects senior citizens, so...
Hey, like I said, what would happen? Could you imagine the hype train that Tampa Bay would be on, only to have like Tom Brady just have to be shut down? What a career ender.
That would be a very Tampa move.
And then what would even be his legacy then? Hey, wasn't he the quarterback that got shut down and ended his career because of the great pandemic of 2020? Not the Super Bowl championships. But, I mean, that's going to be a big thing that I've looked. The NFL hasn't given an answer on. So, like, what are you doing in terms of, they used to have, like, the practice squad. We would know who would be brought up, how many guys you're allowed to carry. With the daily testing, some of that, I mean, you would have to almost fly some of these practice players to the city if you're doing daily tests, unless you're going to overnight them. Like, let's say San Francisco has a game, because the West Coast teams, Matt, they have far traveling. It's not like it's a drive from Pittsburgh to Cleveland where, like, if Ben Roethlisberger gets sick and they need another guy to come up, a player could just drive up from Pittsburgh and be in Cleveland within a couple hours. If you're playing from San Francisco and you're playing, who else is even over there? Well, I guess a lot of those teams moved to LA. Let's use the AFC West. Let's say you're, well, their teams are moving around too. But you're in Kansas City, you have to go all the way down to like the Chargers in LA. What do? It's not like they drive. It's not like, hey, we need you to drive over to the stadium. They're going to have to fly a lot of these extra practice players to the stadium so that they're ready to go if that's how they're going to do this.
I think there'll be an exemption from that they'll get, that if the NFL is allowing these higher cluster groups, that they're not going to pass on the revenue and they're not going to pass on having Pittsburgh play out of town. So they're gonna make an exemption to say, well, they're a professional team and they're allowed because of some other rule, or they'll change it so that it's not going to affect them. And if people are going to be moving as far as college and the ACC and going up to play Pitt, I don't foresee there being any problem there. They'll probably they'll allow that to happen, because it's the whole reason that I've been as frustrated with all of this as I have been is that there's been such a pick and choose of when we're going to apply the rules and when we're not. So I wouldn't be surprised if college is allowed to have as many as they want in their clusters, and the pros can, and third grade flag can, but high school will be under close watch.
And that's probably what will happen. Because the first time you see an NFL sideline and it's completely packed, like, I don't understand how other people wouldn't be mad at that. Like, if you went to your son's football game, but you weren't actually allowed in to watch the game on Friday night, and then you turn the TV on Saturday, there's 150 people on each sideline. Like crazy. So, we're running out of time, though. Because a lot of people have already been drafting, and I tip my hat to you. Because that's the one thing where I didn't want to start looking at, all right, we're going to set up a draft, and then the Andrew Luck thing happens. Because I know a lot of people drafted him only to have him just retire randomly. No insight, just in the middle of a preseason game. He's kind of like walked off. So outside of that, though, you're going to be, in terms of the NFL, the one thing that I hate about this, and I think they really, really should have made a move, is the possibility of just delaying or canceling a game. Because it's real. They've already talked about it this week because I don't know if you've seen the news. And this is skeptical. I'm skeptical about this news. The NFL had a ton of positive tests come back. And there was rumblings this week or last week about them having to just shut it down and shorten the season or whatever they decide to do. They took all those tests, Matt, sent them to a different lab, and now they're all miraculously negative. So you had a few days of thinking, oh, each team has like 10 or more people positive. Now, mind you, it wasn't that they sent all the tests out and they all came back positive. But now they're all coming back negative. So I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but you're telling me that you have all those tests. Every other league has like cases here and there. You have no one? No one positive? But they were positive. But not the entire list that you sent, because you're testing everybody, right?
Yes.
So you're testing everybody. You send them to the lab, 10 people per team, let's say, because I think the Steelers maybe had 6. Some teams were worse than others, but I think I saw the average was around like 10. And that's just my mental math of scanning it. It could have been less. But still, you take all of those positive tests, send them to another lab, and now you're saying your entire league has not had a positive test. You're not in the bubble. It makes zero sense. Like,
but you also see a lot of reports where there's like ones where people will walk away, like they'll get frustrated waiting in line to get their test, and then they leave, and it comes back that they have like a positive test, or that there's like people dispute their original test and it comes back as a false positive. So I mean, I do think that some of the tests that they're getting are not reliable. And that could be something that you're seeing where if everyone's getting tested and there's only a small percentage, but because they're in that bubble, they're not actually at risk, then yeah, it makes sense that there could be some issues with the test.
And so here we go. I got the number. I wasn't exactly, or I was close. There was 77 tests, 7 or 11 teams. So they had 77 positive tests. But see, this is where it gets into, like, it's just a little bit of confusing. I gotta understand what you're saying. Yeah, there could be false positives, but to just say, hey, we had 77 tests, because they examined 11 teams. So they didn't just test 77 people total. They had to test however many people are on those teams. What, 100, like 100 some people? So, I mean, it wasn't like they all came back positive, but then they just asked them to just reinvestigate. And so now they're going to retest them. But it just doesn't make sense. Like, it's all confusing to me how they would just say, hey, we have all these tests. And I know they probably don't have symptoms. Most of them are asymptomatic, so it probably doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But to me, it's not a good look to just announce like, hey, yeah, we're just going to mark those as false so we can get back to practice. Like, we can't have the Jets and the Bears and what's the other team? The Vikings. Vikings had 12. New York had 10 and Chicago had 9. They can't have 3 teams. One in the Minnesota's been in the playoffs. The Bears and Chicago are 2 of the more popular cities. So, of course, they can't have them sit out. If it was Arizona, Tampa Bay, well, Tampa Bay has Tom Brady this year. Jacksonville, probably wouldn't have even retested him at. They're like, oh, hey, this doesn't sound right. We got to get these guys back out there. So that's my other thing. If they're just going to go ahead and just say that everyone's fine, let us know. Let us know, because we won't even have anything. But my initial thought was, you canceled preseason. You didn't give yourself any any slack in your schedule because you kept it the same. Each team has one bye week. If a team does have to cancel, we've seen it across Major League Baseball. Because, I mean, you're not going to be able to stop your guys from going out the entire year. Especially guys that are barely making any money in the NFL. Like, what are they going to do? They're just going to hang around the team the entire time? Like, they already had a guy sneaking girls into his room. He got cut. Like, that's going to happen. So, why not start playing now? Like, they could have announced that they're playing last weekend. And then they say, we're going to move the entire season up like a couple weeks. And then we have three weeks or 4 weeks at the end of the season, whatever it ends up being, where if teams need to get whatever, that's going to be the makeup week. Because the other thing that came out of all these tests, now they're looking at if the season is canceled early, they're just going to start looking at going into a bubble playoff, kind of like what the NBA did in the NHL. So they're already thinking about it. And so that's my thing. I'm thinking that for fantasy football, Matt, for the season to count, like we're going to have to get half the season. So 6 weeks. You get six weeks in, you have a champion. If you only get to like 3 or 4, that's not enough. What are your thoughts on that?
If I'm undefeated, I'm raising a banner.
If it's 1 week?
Did I win?
Not if you play me, baby.
It's called a championship. So, yes, if I win all the games I played, what would Michigan do? If Michigan played one game, they'd raise a banner.
Depends who we beat, Matt.
It doesn't matter. If
we beat Ohio State or Notre Dame,
you could play DeVry. You play anyone. It doesn't matter. Play a third grade team. If we want to know, you can raise a banner.
Well, I think that's going to be the big thing that, like, everyone's just kind of glossing over. The NFL is, like, throwing out their plans like, yeah, if we cancel these games, we might not make them up. We might just say that's it. And we're going to go right to a playoff. And they're going to didn't they expand the playoff this year anyway? So half the teams are getting in. That's why I said right off the bat what they should have did was moved up all of the division games so that you got them out of the way. And then you could say 2 teams from each division, you guys are in the playoffs. So even if you only had 8 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, you could at least look at it and say, these are the best 2 teams in the division. Some divisions might be a crapshoot. It might not work out that way. But now they're not even giving themselves an out. Like, there's no way. Like, they're kind of go into their traditional schedule and plan on just saying by week 8, oh, it really blew up there on us because cold flu season came in. Because, like, they're right in the middle of flu season, too, now. Like, they're like, oh, shucks. We better take a couple weeks off and move to a bubble, Matt.
But I think on the other hand, you're making it seem like, oh, well, we'll just start right now, and there's no logistical implications or adjustments
Matt,
would need to be made at that point.
Preseason, they already had the logistics in place to be playing right now. All they did was cancel preseason. They've been practicing the same amount. They've been doing the same amount of things. There's zero reason why they couldn't have just said the preseason's canceled. We're going to move regular season up by 4 weeks. I know they had the player dispute, but that's been settled for weeks now. So they already had the game scheduled for the preseason. If you're worried about them like making the logistics of travel or whatever, there's only 30-something teams. Major League Baseball made their weird 100 or 60 game schedule work. Football, you're looking at like a handful of games, and 7 of them or 6 of them are already figured out because they're in your division. So play them first. You could drive a bus to most of them. I know some divisions are weird, but like they had it in place, and that's where you look at the leadership. If someone would have just stepped up and said, hey, we're playing, the opt-out was like the beginning of August anyway. So players still would have had the same opt-out date. The NFLPA, they had already decided. I wonder what that date was. I'll look it up. Because that's going to be the big thing. But you could have already been playing and looked at it. What was it? August 3rd, Matt. So everything was set by August 3rd. preseason would have already been going. That's how many weeks? 4 weeks? That you might have missed the first weekend. But you could have moved the season up by 3 weeks and then had 3 makeup weeks built in. And hell, it didn't even have to be at the end of the season. They could have just put 3 bye weeks in. Like, okay, we're just going to cut out the week after Thanksgiving, and we're going to cut out like the first weekend of October, and then the last weekend of whatever would be like around New Year's. I don't know when their season ends. But that would be the thing. Cut it out and then go from there. But they didn't. And now if a team gets canceled, it's going to be like baseball. Baseball is struggling to like try to make some of these games up. And are they going to even get the playoffs in? And if they go to the bubble, is it even going to work? I don't know. Don't know at this point. So, anything else you got on football?
NFL or college or any preference?
NFL stuff right now. We'll get into high school here in a second.
No.
I mean, they've been keeping it pretty quiet. Those are the big key things.
With the exception of Earl Thomas.
Oh, yeah. You want to get into that?
Yeah. Apparently, Baltimore had enough of his shenanigans, and they gave him the boot. So now he's back on the market and rumored to be looking to move back to Dallas. Either the Cowboys, Texans, were 2 of the bigger spots that make sense for him.
And to be honest, it's going to be easy for them to find a spot, most likely, because of all the roster stuff. And in a normal year, maybe he wouldn't even get a chance. I don't know.
But there had to be issues if Baltimore's kept running you out.
That's true.
Ray Lewis killed a man and was able to stay in Baltimore.
But Ray Lewis was also their supplier of deer antler spray. So they're going to get rid of him. He was like their head trainer. And you told me this week that a trainer is worth $1 million at least. You texted me that.
Yes, so, a good trainer is worth it.
Yeah, because that's where, that was a joke from like the Iowa football thing, where they're cutting 4 sports, and they said like the total saving, what did I think I gave you the exact number. They said that they're canceling 4 sports, which equals out to be about $900,000 a year. So, you look at their strength coach, he makes like $1 million. You could just fire that guy, and then you have 4 sports back. But I'm telling you, I wonder how many athletic departments are looking at this as a way just to cut the fat. You say, like, look at all this. You're talking about logistics for a couple football games when they already had the travel and stuff set for the players. Like, all you were doing is possibly changing the destination to get the games in from the preseason. You have to what did they drop? 4 sports. Oh, did I not send it to you? Oh, yeah. Men's gymnastics, men's and women's swimming / diving, and then men's tennis. So, like, men's tennis, how many people are going to watch that? Same with men's gymnastics. If you're not feeding into the Olympics, you're really not going to get the high-profile recruits. And then how is that even helping your school? I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk or whatever, but like, you're giving opportunities for people in the state of Iowa to become gymnasts. They must not have thought that was worthwhile. Because otherwise they would have found a way to keep that. I mean, there's been rumors of them trying to get a men's hockey team. If they cut these 4 sports, because look at it, 3 of them are men's. Only 1 women got cut. If they cut these and in 2 years, miraculously, they join the Big Ten in hockey, are people even going to remember that they used to have these other sports, Matt? Because where's the TV money? TV money for college comes in at football number 1. It's a clear-cut number 1, not even close. Basketball then, that's a number 2. It's distant. And then after that, you have another drop-off where it's kind of like a mix of other sports. Some schools have women's basketball, like UConn. Then they have like some teams are softball. That makes some good TV money. Baseball, I don't really think is up on that level, but hockey is the other one where, because of season tickets and things, you can make some money if you're not traveling as far. The Big Ten started this conference. They need more teams in their vicinity. They're adding teams like Arizona State. That's not going to be friendly on the budget, traveling all the way out there. So they need teams like Illinois and Iowa and other teams like that could be rumored to have a team, because I think Illinois was the one, not so much Iowa, that's closer. But like, what if you cut sports that don't make any money at all? Like, I would have a hard time believing that even if they show tennis and those, that they're going to be next. I mean, Iowa makes probably a ton of money from wrestling. When you win national championships, you're going to make money. Just from sponsorships, getting guys into the Olympics. Same with some schools with volleyball, like Penn State. And I think Nebraska's really good. Like, those are the big bell winners for the Big Ten. All these other sports, it's like, the only team that I know competes is like Indiana and Michigan, maybe in swimming and diving. And they're competing with like the UCLAs and Texas and stuff like that. So like, why have them? But that's my off-topic rant for college. I had some bad news for you, Matt. ACC football, a lot of teams are postponing workouts and things because of the positive tests. If it gets delayed again, and they start to push the games back, I think you're going to look at the same scenario where I just talked about with the NFL, where you have games getting tried to push back, and then you're not going to be able to make them up. And then do they just cancel the entire thing? Because they could have took the same approach. Games could be starting this week, and then have a mandatory quarantine right after. But I don't know. You're laughing.
I don't know.
I mean, that's going to be...
I blame NC State.
What'd you say?
I said I blame NC State.
Hey, UNC was first, and then Notre Dame. Alabama, they said there was like 500 athletes testing positive. How many athletes can they have total? Like, is that like half of them?
I don't know.
But in terms of high school football, the PIAA we brought up earlier, they started, or they kind of left it in the hands of schools, but they did say that there's mandatory heat acclimation, which started, this week, right?
We're in day 2.
So that pushed back the start of your season, because you were supposed to have a game, would have been this first week?
Yeah.
So how's that going?
Surprisingly, it's been going well. I almost feel like in some ways, the extra 2 weeks of preparation has kind of helped my team, because we were going in and it was like getting to the point where kids were recognizing this is when we should be starting. So a lot of the kids, and it, especially from a number standpoint, it was by far the best summer program that we had. And helping with that transition over the 2 weeks, we were able to go through, obviously with some modifications because of social distancing, but we were able to put in a lot of the offense, a lot of the defense, so that now that we're into our heat acclimation, it's more picking up the tempo of our practices and trying to get the kids to understand, like, when you move, you're taking care of the conditioning aspect. So we're not doing as much of the traditional on a line running regular gassers and things like that. We're trying to do some different things so that they're being active. They're going to have their days. And I always thought that heat acclimation was such a weird concept, because you had a lot of schools, like even when I was in North Carolina, guys would be practicing for the better part of summer with helmets and different stuff. And it was always like those acclimation days, it almost felt like it was a step back, because you had to step back to allow for kids that aren't participating in the voluntary programs to try to get them caught up. It's like, realistically, kids are not in a position where a week's going to suddenly change their readiness for fall sports if they've done nothing all summer.
But I'll go the opposite of that. I think that it's a big thing about just trying to get kids in shape so that they're not dying. I don't think it's so much about the heat, because, like, to your point, you're going to have some kids that haven't done anything all summer, And I think if anyone's played sports, they know. Even if it's a sport like baseball where you're barely running, I've seen kids like throwing up after like running like 5 sprints because what they eat is garbage. And maybe it's like the home life or whatever, but they don't have the best diet. They don't have the best habits. They're not working out on their own. And so then they get there. They're complaining hard about having the workout and having the run. And so you're doing those. And I honestly think that just over time, in terms of like, I mean, because even if you watch some of the old stuff, like was there a documentary on Gatorade or something? Because I know I've seen something where Steve Spurrier talks about it. Like back in the day, once you were like, you would just run. And then that would be it. Like you would just drink water and try to get like hydrated or whatever to get back. But the key was to just try to get you caught up in like whatever heat acclimation that you were doing. Plus, as a coach, then you also have to worry about getting them in shape and also teaching them the plays and the playbooks if they haven't been shown. Because this is the first week of mandatory, right?
Yes.
And so you're already behind schedule.
It's sequential that you have to have 5 days of heat acclimation so that then you become eligible to do 5 days of contact practice. So you're able to go full pads the following week. And after you have your 5 contact days, then you're able to participate in a scrimmage.
Well, that's where I think that that's a big key. And they always talk about like, oh, well, if you start to work out, don't overtrain yourself because then you'll just get discouraged. But I always thought the opposite because of like football and growing up. Like whenever you get there, if you work out hard, like when I did the 10K this summer, of course I hadn't worked out in years. So the first thing I did was like, all right, I'm not going to just set a puffy, oh, let's jog 100 meters and then tomorrow we'll come back. It was like, no, you're going to run a mile the first day. And then the second day you're going to be in pain and you're going to do another one. And then by like day 3, guess what? Your muscles get used to it. And then you can go from there. So heat acclimation to me is kind of like the same concept. And you have to be, number one, like I said, you have to be focused on rest and nutrition to do that. Like you have to make sure you're hydrated. You can't go in because also what I would do is like I would make sure that I would stretch out too whenever I was running, because if you're trying to get in shape in a short period of time, and you haven't done anything because it's just a spur of the moment, oh, I'll sign up for this 10K and then try to run a couple miles when you haven't run in forever. Like, you have to just push through it. And so that's where, like, I see people, they talk and they're like, yeah, I used to play sports, but now I'm, like, very super out of shape. And I was out of shape myself, but at some point you have to just push through it and try to do it. I think that's where the heat acclimation comes in because it's working as a team. And you're able to do it. It's not like you're just putting pads on and the extra stress or whatever they're trying to do. It's just kind of get used to doing some type of physical activity, because a lot of people, and from programs that might not be as organized as yours, they might not even had any like summer big time lifting stuff. Because I know some of that across the country is lax at some schools.
Well, and don't quote me for this, but I want to say when I was in North Carolina, that it was like you could go helmet and shoulder pads, like as you were doing part of your voluntary stuff, and then come heat acclimation, it was helmets and shoulder pads were off, and you had to go so many days without, and then build back up into full pad. And that was one of the because I remember like it was something along those lines. I don't know if it was like complete all of the equipment was off. But I remember thinking, like, how are you able to wear a helmet all summer and now heat acclimation and you start back at square zero? Because, like, with certain kids, you know, you brought a good point up about the hydration, because that's one of the biggest things that I bring up with my kids is it's not even so much staying hydrated, but it's what specifically you're drinking. Because a lot of them think, well, I drank a half gallon of iced tea and then I don't know why I'm cramping. It's like, well, because you drank a half gallon of tea. You basically just poisoned yourself.
Yeah, that's a big point, because like I was saying, once you have some of that and you're used to like breaking the habit, then it makes it easier in the long run. If you're going to keep doing things that are just counterproductive to what you're trying to do, like you said, drinking tea or anything, and then running, like you're going to have a bad time. And then of course you're not going to, because what happens like after a little bit, you'll get kind of like a runner's high and you'll feel good. And then you'll say, all right, yeah, I don't mind it. And like I said, you just have to fight through. It's usually like 3 days. Wednesday, the second day is not too bad. I think Wednesday is usually the worst. Let's say you start on Monday. And then after that, then your body starts to get used to it. And like my focus was always on like just do the distance. Like if you're going to do 10-yard sprints, you're doing like however many of them, 20. What did we used to do? We used to do like 20-yard or 30-yard sprints, maybe even 40 yards. I can't remember. But you do that, you're just focused on getting the numbers done with your teammates and trying not to be last. And then you just get used to that distance every time, and then you're probably fine after the first couple of days. But now some schools have the luxury of like ice baths and other things. But going back to your point, I think the main reason why they had you take the helmets off is because of like the mandatory statement that they're putting on there. Because in the summer, you can do whatever you want because it's voluntary. The kids can walk away and not have to worry about like, hey, my son signed up for football. Why is he doing this or that? So once it comes mandatory, that's where they're going to try to look out and say, is it the best strategy? Probably not, because you always see kids passing out and trying to do other stuff. But a lot of times too, it comes back to the same thing. If you're going to drink like a bunch of Monster energy drinks when you first wake up and then go throw on pads and run a bunch of sprints, yeah, you're going to get sick. Like what kind of breakfast is that? And I know kids that used to do that, and then they'd be throwing up and then they'd be like almost ready to pass out because you're just giving what, sugar in your body? So some of that stuff, it starts like as a personal thing. You kind of have to break that habit, because I think that's where you see a lot of people, athletes especially, once they stop playing sports. If you look at a lot of like ex-professional athletes, their weight balloons up like into like grotesquely obese. And I don't mean to be mean, because like if you look at just some of them, you know that it was a combination of them stopping their workouts and then them going back to whatever habits they used to have. Probably like in high school, like, yeah, I used to eat this. McDonald's, perfect. That's cheap. I'll go there. And then guess what? You're not running anymore. And then that's it. So that's like, if you play a sport, this is a high school tip. And like, let's say you're like a sophomore, all you have to do is run every once in a while. And then you'll stay in like semi-decent shape. So like when football's over, if you stop and don't do anything for the next however many weeks, then of course you're going to show up like you're super out of shape. However many months that would be. Like again, even if you would take off January all the way to like summer lifting, like you're already just putting yourself back before wherever you were. So that's the one thing. If you're worried about heat acclimation, because that, to me, that never really bothered me. It was almost like another push through. Like you've been working out all summer. Now you can focus on like trying to increase your speed or whatever else you're going to do. Not just like, oh, great, now I got to get in shape. Now I got 2 days I got to get in shape for because I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys got going on?
No, just we're transitioning. Our district starts back with students the first day tomorrow, so we're kind of waiting to see how the school year is going to go, because if we can follow the rules and behave ourselves and wear masks, and there's a good chance we'll have football. So the drum I've been beating is play the game. They want you to wear your mask and social distance and everything else, do whatever it is that they're saying so that we can play.
And I think that's where a lot of things are going. People realizing that they have to do that. I just looked at the Alabama numbers again. I read it wrong. It wasn't 500 athletes. It was just students in general. But as you reopen and try to do that kind of stuff, it's almost like more of a camaraderie thing. If your high school opens back up, you better have your football players keeping their distance and doing whatever to try to stay healthy. Because you got to take care of yourself, number one. So it's almost like, what was it? Was it Matt Stafford that got called out? No, some quarterback got called out by their team. And they're like, Was it Sam Darnold? They were like, yeah, we told someone like, yo, just stop going out to clubs. And at that point, it was almost like, why would you have to tell them that? I can't remember which quarterback it was. I saw it as like a trending thing. I'll see if I can find it.
I was thinking it's Darnold, to be honest.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I don't see it in my notes here. But at that point, it's like, why are you telling your quarterback not to go out to clubs? Like, why would that even be a thing right now? What clubs are open? I wouldn't even think like, oh, practice is over. Got to get out. Got to go out and do that. How about like, yeah, let's make sure that I make as much money as I can and not be a guy that just disappears after a few years and is working at an auto dealership doing whatever, cameos on their commercials. Let's see what else. Let's see what else I had on my agenda. So Major League Baseball, they've been doing catch-ups with their game schedule, trying to get the Cardinals caught up. I think they've been doing actually a pretty good job, to be honest.
And they're in second place right now.
Oh, let's not talk about records, Matt. I was just talking about the logistics in terms of football. Because in football, you can't do a doubleheader. Could you do a Monday, an extra Thursday game? Maybe. But they didn't build that into the schedule. Baseball didn't either, though, to be honest. They waited and waited and waited too long. And then they got stuck for whatever. But the Pirates, at one point, Matt, I was waiting to come onto the show and say they were on pace for 12 games. And then they swept the Brewers. I think it was the Brewers, right? My head's getting all mixed up. But now they have 7 wins. So I had it perfect. The math worked out perfect where it would have been 12 wins out of 60. They could break that this week. And I could look like a fool. But still in dead last. Still in dead last. Tigers aren't doing much better. But you're right. The Cardinals battled back. And they have a winning record. And that's why I brought it up a couple weeks ago. Where you were saying the team that played the more games should be the winner. But the Cardinals, they didn't play as many games as the other teams. You would think that they would just get cut out. That was your idea?
Yeah, they're going to start playing triple headers and winning.
Just to make up. So what do they have?
Now that they had all that rest from coronavirus, they're ready to go.
They have 18 games in. The Cubs ahead of them have 28. So they would have to go 8-2 to be tied with them for first.
They'll get there.
That's how far behind they are. But they still have to make them up. But that's one team. I mean, unless you just keep retesting the same tests and then have the people play, which could be the strategy.
Excuse me, you've tested positive. No, I'm good. Good.
No, playing. Send that back. Send that back right now. I'm fine. But man, I would hate it. So far, so good. Like no coaches or anything across the other leagues have gotten any type of debilitating sickness so far. At least hospitalizations that I know of. The one thing, the Philadelphia Flyers, they advanced, which you hate to see it. I hate to see it, Matt. I don't want a world where the Flyers can win the cup. Even if it's a weird year. Now, luckily, they're down a game already. Like, I hope they get swept. I was hoping the Hurricanes would be able to battle back. They were hot there in the first round. Nope. Boston cleaned them up. And so, right now, I'm just hoping that the Flyers don't try to make a thing. Penguins cleared a bunch of staff out. And now they're looking at moving one of their goalies. So that's the big NHL news. I didn't even put it on here. But that's what we're looking at for the Penguins. And then the NBA. They went into a bubble. Their idea was that their ratings would increase. It's dropped. Not even in terms of playoff ratings being down. Their ratings are lower, Matt, with these playoff games and the start of the bubble than what they were for the regular season before coronavirus hit. So they took a sport that could have really capitalized, and now they're dropping. So people are questioning. They don't even know if it's from how political they've gotten because of the China controversy, because They didn't really comment on China whenever they had that. And then China said that they weren't going to show their games then. But then I was wondering, those wouldn't even count in the television ratings anyway. So I think it's weird that people are discussing about that, because the TV ratings are only in the United States, from my knowledge anyway. Unless they have some finicky, weird ratings that they add in to get their normal thing. But ESPN said that their ratings are down 20%. Overall, cable, like TNT, their ratings are down more than 40%. And it's not just basketball. It's across the entire like television. They were saying that like 40% of every network is down. So like where a television show might get like 15 million people, they're getting like 8. And so what are people doing? They're just getting rid of their television? Because let's be honest, they inject coronavirus into everything. I mean, even our show, we talk about it because we're trying to talk sports, but you really can't when you have all these logistical things. I would just hate to be watching any show that even just talks about it. Like, I would rather just turn it on, watch a sports game without any commentary. But that's the thing. They're talking about their ratings. They don't know what it is. There's no fans. They're trying to do digital fans. But did you see how that went bad for the WWE?
No.
They had like virtual fans. And I think what happened was like someone had dressed in a KKK outfit or something. But they didn't have anyone watching it. So they said, I didn't see the footage, but they said that you could see it on USA. Because like you could see the people wrestling, and whatever they had, I don't know if it was like they had TV set up to show the people, but they said you could just see it in the like one of the front rows. Which is just crazy to me. Like, what kind of, whose idea would even have that to not screen that stuff? Because that could have been anything. Like that, I mean, jeez. Why couldn't they just have nothing? Have nothing. Once you give people freedom, Matt, crazy. That they would not, number one, I don't think they caught it. And then they said that they were looking into banning him. Looking into it. Like, you couldn't ban him during the television?
Nope.
So, NBA starting to try to do that, which is probably not a good idea. And then they're trying to see if they can take extra money off of YouTube and like Twitter highlights that people are posting. They think that that might help them make up, because that's exactly what people want, is to have their videos that they make of like highlights just be taken down on copyright strikes. So the NBA can then put their same video back up. Because then you know what happens? People stop making them. And then guess what? They stop watching them. That's exactly what happens with the video game stuff too. Because some companies, they were like, I think PlayStation was like blocking what you could upload from some of the stuff. And then guess what? People just stopped doing it. And then they were wondering why people aren't sharing their stuff anymore. So NBA they're looking like they're on a slippery slope. And I'm hoping that the NFL, when they play, that the TV ratings, even if they are down, that they're not down as much, because their numbers for the draft were still over 15 million people. So it's not like people aren't watching. I think we said last time I had TV numbers on that celebrity golf thing. Tom Brady, when he was on, there was like 5 million people watching that. NBA is struggling to get 1 million. And there's nothing else on. So, I mean, maybe baseball. But baseball, they always compete with baseball. And they always compete with hockey. So there's nothing on right now that they normally don't compete with. When football starts, though, that's going to be another thing, that in the fall, normally football just crushes the NBA ratings. And that's why people don't talk about it until like January or so. So that's my last thing. You got anything else?
Nope. That's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. Looks like a lot of people checked out our site, so we appreciate that. Like I said, we're trying to get it more focused on finding the episodes faster so you can just download it, give you something to listen to. Even if you don't listen to the whole thing, tell your friends. I know we're at the end, so you probably tuned out already, but tell your friends we're still going. Fantasy football. Hopefully you get your league up and it goes smooth. That's what we're hoping for ours. Already got some people opting in. So that's good. We'll probably be able to give it a go now and see what happens. So, anything else? All right. Hopefully we got some football to talk to you about, unless college football cancels those games. I forget who and it's going to be, but that will be the highlight of our show next week. So tune in for that. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.